So just a couple of updates. All the grading should be done as of today at some point. All the credit card stuff done last night, except for yours, Rochelle. Get yours done today. Um, the rest of it should get caught up today and get you some more feedback. Didn't have any time to do it this week on vacation, so we'll be back on track, I think, for next week. So any questions you have that you want to get answered before we get going here? Homework questions, anything you want to see? Any other questions? Anyone? Anyone? All right. Well, today, let me know if you have something as we go forward. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about, we're getting into statistics, as you know. And today, I want to talk a little bit more about, as I always try to do on these things, is talk about a little more about the why we do it and not so much the how. All the how stuff that you need is already online. Again, I'd encourage you to look in the frequently asked questions video folder. If you find something that, you need a little more help with, something like I've pretty much done videos for everything now. So let's say you need help with refinancing, there's a video in there for refinancing. Or if you need help with, I don't know, how to make a histogram on Google Sheets or something, that's all in there. If it's something that I haven't covered in the regular video, or something that's specific to a question you have, there's pretty much a video for everything in there. Go poke around, and that link is underneath that instructions getting started module. So anyway, statistics, the reason we like to talk about it, the reason I like to talk about it, well, number one, is part of the class. I made a big deal when years ago, I pissed somebody off at PCC. And I know it's hard to believe, but anyways, so as punishment, I guess, they gave me this class, and I was like, no one wanted to teach it. And I said, dude, I love it. And they handed me a book. I said, what do I teach? And there was literally no curriculum. They said, here's a book. There's 14 chapters. Teach 6 of them. I go, which 6? Any 6 you want. I'm like, right. Or maybe it was 5. I'm like, right on. And so I did. And I taught the ones that I liked. And so when after this class kind of became more of a thing and it became more in vogue, which it's about time it did, to not have people have to take, all this algebra. This is, algebra is not the end all and be all of the world. For some people, it's going to be great. For other people, I mean, you're going to use algebraic concepts your whole life. Let's be clear about that. You will constantly wonder about, I have this much money, I need to buy this and this, how much can I do? I mean, that's algebra, all right, whether you think about it or not, it is. But when it gets into things like, I don't know. Well, here's what pissed people off, because I don't know who I still don't know who I made exactly mad. They ratted me out and said that you're teaching about things that are not on the curriculum. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, you're teaching rational functions, and you're talking about the word asymptotes. And I'm like, yeah. It says right here, describe the shape of a graph of a rational function. And they're like, yeah, but asymptote's not one of the words. I'm like, well, what are you going to call it? I said, that's what it's actually called. And so anyway, as I say, we get into this class, and once this class starts taking off, no one in their right mind and no one in the real world, just a normal person, is going to be using rational functions, graphing them, knowing what an asymptote is. It's not a big deal. No one's going to be talking about exponential growth as a general rule, although exponential decay, like when can I go in the bathroom after someone's been there? When is it safe to go in there, right? That's exponential decay. I'm not going to sit down and figure out the math for that, but that's what it is you're doing. And so some things that we talk about in this class, all about mathematical, we call it mathematical literacy, but actually there's a word for it. It's called numeracy. And the idea that you understand how math works and you understand and you can function with it properly. So this last week, I heard several people talking about the virus that's going around. Did you know it's growing exponentially? Here's a news flash. Every population always grows exponentially. What? Yeah, literally every population always grows exponentially. Well, that's just crazy. They just said on the news like it's a big deal. Yeah, because it sells, okay? Exponential growth is how every population, period, ever grows, okay? Now, that's an algebra concept, that's true, but it's also a statistics concept, and we're going to look at some of that in terms of, here's some data, what can we do about it? That's why it's kind of a big deal for me. What I want people to understand when they walk away from my class is to have some understanding about how graphs work, how statistics work, what they mean, and then have the idea that, hey, wait, is someone trying to play a fast one on me? they're trying to like, were they trying to manipulate me in some fashion or other, whether it's, on the virus thing or whether it's something else, whether you're trying to raise money, whatever it happens to be, people trying to skew the numbers a little bit, trying to influence me in some way, and then look beyond the numbers a little bit beyond that. Okay. I think it's pretty clear that if a tobacco company did some study about, lung cancer and cigarettes, and they came away with saying that, they're not that bad for you, I think most people go, well, I'm not sure I'm buying that, because based on who's doing the study, clearly. And so other things that happens all around us in the daily life. That's why I want to talk about it. So like I said, this last week, it just annoyed me to hear people saying, oh, did you know it's growing exponentially? I did. Yeah. And it doesn't, that word right there doesn't scare me like you think it should scare me. I think that's because I understand how things work. Okay. Yeah, it is. My money also grows exponentially when I put it in the bank. By the way, not very fast right now because our interest rates are so low. So it's growing exponentially. In other words, not a straight line. Look at that, not a straight line, a curved line going up like that. Just not that fast because our interest rate's small. Okay. And so just gonna think about those things as you go about them. That's something I want to talk about. Also, the reason we study graphs a lot is because it's very easy to mislead people or lie to them with graphs. And so I want to talk about, what do these graphs represent? How do we get our points across with graphs? What is the point of it? All right. And then kind of going from there, then when you see somebody else's graph, well, what are they trying to show here? Is it making it better or is it making it worse? So those kind of things we like to talk about. Get an understanding about, for those of you that are going to go on to stats 243 and 244, get an understanding about what is standard deviation, what is mean and variance, things like this. Get an understanding about what they mean so that when you go there and you're taking 243 and someone mentions it, you're like, you have a better understanding of kind of preparing you for what's going to happen going forward. And again, that's why to me, my master's degree is in, it's almost all in statistics. Thanks, Portland State. It's not quite statistics. It didn't quite finish out that way. I changed at the last minute, but it was fine. But I love statistics from what you can do about it. It's all about decision making. All right. It's always about decision making. Now, whether that's for your, oh, come on, Jay, fantasy baseball team or something, and you're like trying to make a decision of who should be on your fantasy baseball team or football team or whatever, which I couldn't care less about. Good for you. But, whether you're a sabermetric guy or not, which I don't like, the only place I love statistics, I love baseball. It's the only thing in the world when you put the two together, two good things together, makes it worse, in my opinion. But some people really dig that. I don't need statistics to tell me that Brandon Belt is not that great at first baseman. He plays for my Giants. I don't care. They constantly making up these statistics and they're like, see, he's the greatest of all time. I'm like, okay, dude, I don't know. All I know is he can't hit left-handed pitching, and nobody who's the greatest of all time gets platooned against a left-handed pitcher. Okay, I'm sorry, you're not that good. Nobody had to tell me that Lou Gehrig was a great first baseman because the stats just speak for themselves. All right, look, that guy can hit. He's got all these home runs and everything. That's great. What would the Yankees do for that? We want to keep him around. That was decision making for them. Okay, that if he was bad, the stats say he's not very good. Let's get rid of him. Okay. Now, clearly, some of these statistics can be tweaked different ways. So in education, we're constantly being checked on by test scores, right? By how the kid did on the state test. And there was this woman who was a teacher here a few years ago, and she was just not a good teacher. And the kids didn't like her, and which that's now that not the end all be all of whether you're a good teacher or not. But if you got good kids that are like, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, she's so mean, or she's this or that, and she doesn't care about the kids and stuff, that should factor into some degree, not 100%, but should factor into some degree. But we'd have discussions with her in the math department and like, well, you should be teaching this, this, and this. We try to keep our Algebra 2 classes all in the same spot, like in the book, right? So we're all in chapter 7 or whatever. And like she'd be teaching some stuff that's not even on the syllabus. You're like, what are you doing? Well, I just think I like this stuff. You're like, okay, well, that's great. And our principal one time came to me and said, Jay, that she is a great teacher. She gets results on the state math test. I'm like, okay, dude, getting results on the test because that's all you do is teach to it doesn't make you a great teacher. And so obviously we can have different, we can look at the same data and go, yeah, okay, so some of her kids passed. She taught in that year that she worked for us, or 2 years she worked for us, she taught all Algebra 2s and geometries, and she ended up having like the better load. Where other people, like my buddy Roger, he taught. Are you in now, Victoria? Is everything okay? I just got your message there. Okay, good. My buddy Roger, he taught pre-calculus, and so by the time the kids got to him, they had already passed the state math test. So like none of his kids in pre-cal even took the state math test because they took it when they were like in algebra 2 and passed it. And then he also taught some lower end classes, and so his lower end classes didn't pass it very well. And all of a sudden, you're going to tell me my buddy Roger's a bad teacher? No, he teaches the good kids who'd already passed the math test, and he teaches the lower end kids who struggle with the math test. But you can't tell me he's not a bad teacher. It doesn't make sense. Okay. And same with me. I taught calculus and statistics and physics. Those are 3 of my good classes. Well, guess what? All those kids had passed it before I touched them. And then I also taught 3 low end classes, and those kids struggled like heck to pass the test, right? To the point where most of them didn't pass it. We had to find the opposite, another way around becoming proficient in math for them. And there's another option for that. And so you can't just take a look at that and go, oh yeah, that's what that means. Oh, okay, great. So different things, obviously, you know, what are we going to do? So some years ago, we had I was in charge of the math testing for our school district, for the high school. And I remember this like it was yesterday. There's this kid who was not very bright, nice kid, not very bright. He got done taking the test in the computer lab, and he jumped up and screamed and danced around, and then ran out of the classroom, and he ran back in, and he high-fived me, and then he ran out the door. I'm like, what was that about? So I looked on his computer screen. He passed. I'm like, there's no way that kid passed, but he did. And there was 3 or 4 others, and so I'd always keep track of this spreadsheet of who passed and who didn't. So in the fall, I had asked the district to send us over a report, you know, so I could finish the official report, so I could finish crunch the numbers from last year. And the secretary over there sent me a list, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, this isn't right, because this kid didn't pass and this kid didn't pass. Or they passed, but you're saying they didn't pass. And I'm like, what? And so I emailed her again, and so it's back and forth. She sent me another set of data, and I'm like, well, this is different data, but it's still not accurate. And then she sent me a different one. I'm like, where are you getting this data from? Are you making it up? So now I have 4 sets of data, and I'm not saying mine was 100% accurate, because there could have been an error or 2. But then she sent me 3 more sets. Now I had 4 sets of data. So finally, the superintendent said, Jay, just crunch the numbers. I'm like, I would love to crunch the numbers. Which set do you want me to use? And she said, just pick one. It doesn't matter. Okay, well, why are we even keeping track if it doesn't matter? Okay, if it doesn't matter what set of data I use, then any decision that I make based on these numbers is going to be suspect. Okay, and so you got to get good, clean data. Make sure you got accurate data. Make sure it says what you actually want to prove. And then when you're done, you need to be able to actually analyze it, you know, from a normal, truthful standpoint to be able to make any real decision based on it. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm very, very, very cynical, and I try to keep it out of this class as much as possible. But I've worked for the government for 24 years now, and it's really hard to do sometimes, because they will say things like, "We need to be data driven," and you're like, "Okay, well, here the data says this." Is like, "Wow, not that data." And so it's very hard sometimes to work in my situation to be not cynical about it, but I try my best. To be aware of that. As we're going along, you're going to run into as you go in your life, you're going to run into situations where the data says this. Like, well, does it really say that, or do you think it says that? Okay, and go back and find out where that data came from. So the people I teach at OIT, I teach class or 2 down there, and I teach statistics down there. Those guys are a lot into manufacturing. Here's an idea. If you are manufacturing stuff, like big time manufacturing stuff, how many rejects do you want coming off the line? Let's see, none. Okay. How much slop do you want to see between this assembly line versus this assembly line? Do you want to be able to tell whether the product came off this line or this line? No, you want no difference between these 2 lines. And if there is, let's find out why. And then if there's a way we can do things better to save money, to be more efficient, let's do it. That's what statistics should be all about. Okay. The idea that let's get some data, let's get good data, let's see if we're doing things right, and if we're not, let's fix them. Or if we are doing them right, but we can do them better, let's make it so it's better, whether it's more efficient, faster, cheaper, whatever it is. Okay, let's make a decision and then go with it. Okay, so statistics, for the standpoint of saying a statistic, doesn't say a whole lot for me. If all you're doing is telling me a statistic, you know, Brandon Belt's war or whatever, yay. But if I'm going to do something with something, then obviously that's what statistics should be all about. Okay. and just be aware of that going forward. So that's kind of where we're going to go in this situation, being able to understand things like, we're going to talk about percentiles next week. You'll hear them from time to time, whether your kid scored a 92% or a 92nd percentile on a reading test, that's pretty good. If he scored in the 7th percentile, that's not very good at all. If your kid is in the 82nd percentile of height, you're like, oh, I don't really care. My husband and I are, we're just right around a little over average. Okay, great. Okay, but here's something to think about. When you look at that and you're like, wow, this kid is really, or maybe your kid tests, he's been tracking along at about the 12th percentile of height, but you're like, your husband and I are, your husband and yourself are like really tall people. And like, that's kind of weird. The doctor thinks that too, by the way, and they'll track that and they can see, is there something wrong with this kid in terms of his growth? Is there something wrong with this? And then the idea of, what does that really mean to us? Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next week, but that concept of percentile, people think they get it, but then they don't really get it. Like, you score 92nd percentile on the test, you're like, oh, I'm good. Yeah, you are. You're good. That's great. Some things it doesn't matter at all. Like, you're a tall person. Okay, well, you're tall because your parents are tall. That's how life works. Okay, unless you're some kind of genetic throwback or something. But that's in general that should happen. But when you start talking about things like incomes, we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. It was very in vogue a few years ago, the top 10 percenters and the 5 percenters and all this stuff. People don't really grasp what that means in terms of percentages. Okay, so we're going to talk some more about that next week. But again, so much of our life, we hear these statistics are just bandied about. And number one, most people don't question them. Okay, where did they come from? Number two, they don't, not only do they not question them, okay, they just take at face value. They think what they're hearing is what is being trying to be said. In other words, so somebody threw a statistic out there and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, that is. But is there a reason for that? In other words, it's not always the most obvious factor that's at play. One of my all-time favorite examples of that is that did you know that there's more ice cream sold when there's more bikinis on the beach? It's a fact. It is 100% a fact. Okay. Well, oh my God, we need to get more bikinis on the beach. Oh, you have to sell more ice cream. That's not what's doing it, pal. It's because it's hot out. All right. When it's hot out, how about the ice cream sales spike? People wear swimsuits in the summertime. How about that? They go hand in hand. So sometimes you'll hear a statistic, you'll immediately, that one's ridiculous, obviously, but immediately you're like, you jump to a cause and effect situation. Okay. Immediately in your mind. Now, why is that? Well, sometimes the people who are reporting the statistics wanted you to do that. Okay, that was their specific goal, was that I will tell you a statistic, I will paint you a picture, and then I'll let you make the assumption. Typically, it's that same idea there. I think the price of a subway ticket has always been the same price. Really? No, never been to New York. Really? I figured a piece of pizza costs more than a ticket, but no, I don't know. That's interesting. But yeah, so just things like that. It's like, well, do they go hand in hand? Yeah, I don't know. So sometimes there's a cause and effect relationship. Sometimes it's just what's called correlation. They tend to go together. Tall people tend to weigh more than short people. It typically happens that way. You're a bigger body, you're going to weigh more to look the same height, same whatever. My oldest son is a 6'6". He's always been a scrawny skin and bones. Only been the last couple of years he's finally, I think the last 3 years ago, maybe he's 24 now. He finally hit the 200-pound mark, and he finally looks, sort of healthy. Okay, he doesn't look fat at all. He just looks scrawny and gaunt before, and now he's finally starting to kind of fill out and look normal sized. Okay, he certainly isn't heavy at all, and it's just what it is. Now you put 200 pounds on a 5'6" little guy, it's going to look obviously a lot bigger. But in generally speaking, the taller you get, the more you weigh to be the same amount. Correlation, it's correlation. It's not cause and effect, because I know tall, skinny people, and I know short, skinny people, and I know tall, fat people, and I know short, fat people, and everybody in between. Okay, it's not a direct cause and effect. There just happens to be a correlation there. Okay, just think about those sorts of things as you go along. So things like also like spending money. The more money you make, the more money you spend. Yeah, that's true. To a point. I know some people that make a lot of money that don't spend very much at all. And I know some people that make a decent amount of money and they spend money like it's water, and they cannot grasp the concept of why they, quote unquote, they always tell me this. It's so annoying to me because I know how much money he makes because he works for the government, and it's just out there. And I know how much his wife makes, and they are not poor by any means, but he's constantly talking about how poor he is. And I'm like, dude, just stop. Okay. And you spend too much, and he won't hear about that. And whatever, that's how life goes. But obviously, the more money you make, people are millionaires, obviously spend more people than people that make $50,000 a year. That's just how it goes. Direct cause and effect. There's people that make a lot of money that sit on it, and they're like the little Scrooge McDucks, I guess. It's in the bank over there, but they don't spend it. They drive old beater pickups or whatever, and they sit around and they don't spend much. But that's just how it goes. So again, that's kind of the reasons that I like to talk about statistics. I want you to feel comfortable going forward out of this class, for instance, and to feel confident about things, and to question where the statistics came from. To look at polls, for instance, that's another one. You can make a poll, say whatever you want to say based on who you talk to. I just absolutely hate polls. I hate them. I hate them from the standpoint of for the most part, I don't care what other people think, but I'm also not in politics. If I was in politics, obviously I'd have to care what my constituents think, but I'd want an accurate representation of what my constituents thought, not just necessarily the ones I want to hear from. Okay. And so you can go out there, you can stack a poll 100 different ways from Sunday, say exactly the same quote unquote population, get 100% different results from the other poll based on how you stack the deck on them. Okay. And so some classic examples of that, it's called introducing bias. Classic example of this, and I always made kids when I taught statistics in high school, I would just tell them, I want you to go over to Walmart or Safeway, and I want you to ask people a question. And so we would go over their questions ahead of time, whatever it was. And I didn't do a whole lot other than I didn't want to be like, I don't want you to ask anything offensive or anything, but just go over there and ask them people or whatever. And then, so when they came back, we talked about it. And it was funny, because a lot of these kids would sit in there and they wouldn't ask somebody that came out the door. I'm like, why didn't you ask them? Well, like that mom, she had like 3 little kids and she looked really busy and they didn't want to bother her. Oh, okay. And so I said, by not talking to parents with kids, do you think you skewed the data a little bit? Well, yeah. All right. Why'd you go talk to this person? Well, I feel like I had to check. I didn't have one of those on my list. So I had to go talk to this person. I had to talk to one of these people. And it's kind of weird in today's politically correct culture. Instead of trying to get an accurate representation of what our population looks like percentage-wise, okay, it's very common for people to go, I need to get a certain number of these people on my list, a certain number of these people, and a certain number of these people, and a certain number of these people. As if you're trying to accurately or evenly represent everybody, even though they're not evenly represented in the population, whether that's how they are. It doesn't matter, whatever group they happen to be in, whether it's, it could be race, for instance, in St. Helens. We have a lot of, we don't have very many Black people or very many Hispanic people. We do have some Hispanics. If you went out there and said, listen, I need to get 10 of each, like white, 10 Hispanic, 10 African American. All right. Problem with that is you're saying that based on your data, you're going to have a third of each represented. Well, that's not what the population is in this particular county, in this particular city. If you go to some other places in the world, that'll be completely backwards from that. And if you were to do that, what you're doing is you're weighting the population differently than it actually is. And so in an effort to eliminate bias in your mind, you're actually introducing bias to the situation because you're overweighting certain parts of the population that are in the community. Okay, and that's one that's nowadays has become very in vogue thing to do because you're trying to show how you're not biased. Therefore, you're doing accurate or even representation, even though that's not what the actual population consists of. Okay. And again, that's just one that just comes up a lot recently when you wonder, well, why does this or that happen? There you go. Currently in the polls, in the news media, they routinely oversample Democrat opinion. That's just a fact. You can go look it up. And it happens all the time. Now, why? I don't know. I'm not going to I will not get into policy disputes in this class. I won't get into any kind of hardcore anything. That's just a fact. You can look them up. But if you stack the deck all Republican or mostly Democrat or this way or that way, you can make the poll say whatever you want it to say. And that's just how it is. Okay. And so just be aware of those. When you hear numbers, well, what did the poll, who did they ask? All right. Did you ask likely voters? Did you ask registered voters or did you ask adults? If you're asking adults, they will have one kind of opinion. Okay, that's nice. But all adults don't vote. We have about 40% people vote every time it comes around. Okay. So, so did you ask registered voters? Well, of registered voters, again, it's only like 30% of the population or 40% of them, whatever, vote. So not even all of the registered voters vote. Oh, but if you ask likely voters, that is someone who votes every time or almost every time, what they think, you're going to get a more accurate representation of what's going to happen in the actual election. Okay. And so just be aware of that. Did they ask? Who did they ask? Why did they ask that? Maybe then also ask yourself, why aren't they asking the appropriate people? Like if I'm a politician, I want to know what my constituents think. That's true. But the people who are going to elect me are the voters. The people that's who they're going to vote for me. Right? It's not the general populace. The general populace, they might gripe about him. Oh, that guy, whatever. By the way, just as an aside, I fired off some letters to my congressman yesterday, like I do every couple of weeks. I fire off letters to my congressman. I think people should do that. Makes me feel better. I don't think they ever pay attention to them, but that's fine. But anyways, but as you do this, like the general populace doesn't vote for me. Okay, the likely voters who vote for me, registered voters to some degree. If I could get more to turn out and vote for me, that'd be great. All right, but in generally speaking, it's the registered voters who are going to make the difference. Okay. So just kind of keep those thoughts in the back of your head. When you hear a poll, how did they do that? How did they conduct it? Who was in the poll? Why might it have been structured a certain way versus another way? And just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Be a little cynical about some of these things. I'm going to share here real quick. So if you've seen it, I'll find the link here. So this book, I have the link. You're going to read 2 chapters, and you're going to read 2 chapters for me in this book. One this week, I think, and then one is in a couple weeks from now. It was written in 1950, I think. Here, I'll pull it up. This link is online. It's in the discussion. Love this book. Discovered it quite by accident one time. I always carry a copy with me now. The guy is brilliant at 1954. Okay. Everything in this book happens today exactly the same as it did back then. I would say this, that understand it was written in the 50s, so they use some different verbiage. And then also in this book, and I only show 2 of them, but you're welcome to read the whole thing. It's great. The only difference between some of this and what goes on in this book is, remember to add about, I love his drawings he does in here, his graphs and stuff. It's hilarious. Oh, where's that? Yeah, some of his graphs. He draws them all by hand, okay, and talks about them and stuff, and what can you do about them and whatever. But the whole point is to get people to understand that, hey, people lie to you with statistics all the time. They use the exact same techniques they did in the 50s as they do now. It's only easier to do now because I can use cooler graphics now. I like those old 1950s kind of sketches that you'd have seen in a newspaper. I thought those were kind of neat looking. But now we flash them on the front page of USA Today or some website or whatever, this giant, shocking graph. And like, what are you trying to show by that? Okay, and it's very easy to do, obviously, nowadays we have better technology and better graphics and so forth. We're trying to get people excited about things. We're trying to catch their eye. Okay, we're trying to get our point across, and it's a lot easier to do now, again, nowadays than it used to be. I would say this in this book, when you read it, throw about 3 zeros on the end of all the numbers he says for the rich people, because it was 1954 after all. 3 or 4 zeros at the end of it, and then it's today's money. It's the same thing, okay? The same things that were happening back then are the same things that are happening now. Excuse me. So the one you're going to read this week is about how to lie with graphs. I think it's called the GWiz graph. And you're going to do a discussion post on that this week. I want you to look up some graphs online. And I'm very specific in my directions. Most teachers, if you hadn't noticed, have a certain political bent to them. I don't believe that a teacher should ever bring his political bent in the classroom, quite honestly. That's just me, whatever. But when you look up bad graphs online, they will almost all, if you go to somebody, it'll be a teacher's website, and it'll almost always be a Fox News graph. God knows they make bad graphs too. I want you to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, I want you to look deeper than that, because the first like page of graphs will be like, oh, Fox News, Fox News. Yes, I know, I've seen them all. They are all bad. You're right. Go somewhere else. Look up different ones. That's what I want you to see, and come up with different examples of what they're trying to show. So in the book, Huff, he shows examples of how they, for instance, one thing they try to do is they want to minimize the differences. They'll smush the y-axis down. Okay, so instead of going from 0 to 100, they might go from 0 to 1,000. Well, what does that do to your graph? It makes it flatter. It makes it show that there's hardly any change at all. If you want to exacerbate a change and you want to show, hey, listen, there's very little change here at all, but I want to make it look ginormous, then instead of going from like 0 to 10, we'll make it go from, or from 0 to 100, we'll make it go from 0 to 10, and it'll make any tiny little change look massive. And you're like, oh my God, the world's falling apart. No, you ding dong, they changed the graph to try to make you think that, okay? And so why are they doing that? Well, they're trying to lie to you about it, try to get you to be more involved, get you to do this, you know, pay more, whatever it is. You know, think about these things as they're going along. I think one of the goofiest things I've ever heard some years ago, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago now, this guy, when he started seeing this and he was looking around online, he's like, man, you're right. They're constantly doing these things. I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, there should be a government program to keep people from lying to you with statistics. I'm like, oh yeah, and who's going to keep track of them? So it's just crazy. So it doesn't really matter where you come in from it at. Just be aware that it's out there. It will happen. Okay, if I want to show that there's not much of a difference at all, I can do that. If I want to show there's a huge difference, I can do that too. But it's the exact same techniques that happened in the 50s and even before then are still happening today. That's why that book is so relevant. And then there's also one about post hoc. That'll happen a bit later too. We'll talk about that one when we get to logical fallacies. And so that's just another one of the books. But I think it's a great little book. Doesn't take a whole lot of reading. And by the way, I'm not much of a reader. I'm not a big reader at all. And that's one of the few books that I remember sitting down and like couldn't pull my nose out of until I got it finished. It was pretty exciting. I just thought it was kind of neat to see how nothing's changed, and it's pretty much exactly the same going through the thing. So graphically speaking, the things that I'm gonna grab some of the computer over here. The whole point of graphs is to make something clearer. That's really the whole point. And so when we do graphs, you have to ask yourself, is what I'm doing making it clear, or am I making it worse? And try to be honest with yourself about that. And so some of the data that we will look at will be things like, you know, here we have some what we call categorical data. So categorical data are things like, for instance, eye color, car brand, breed of dog, whatever. And the idea is that they can be dropped into certain categories, okay? And I suppose breed of dog could be mutt too. You could throw that in there. Like, what about my dog? He's a crossbreed. Okay, yeah, you could go in the mutt category, whatever it is, okay? Obviously, at some point, you have to put everybody into a category if you're going to do one of these things. So when you're doing them, keep that in mind and understand that you're based on this situation, everyone has to fit into one of these categories. Otherwise, you can't very well show the thing, okay? But say you had something easy like eye color, and again, this is all in the videos in terms of that, but think about this from white. Why are you gonna write white? Let's do car brands. I don't know, Chevy, Ford, Dodge, Toyota, whatever, good enough. That's fine, don't really care. All right, well, what are you gonna tell me? Well, you're gonna tell me how many there are. Okay, I don't know. I'm gonna make this end in 5. That's easier to add up. Nice. All right, and then if you add that, that's 10, carry the 1, that's 6, 8, 14, carry the 1, 2, 240 total cars there. That's about right, I think so. And so how could you show me this graphically speaking? Like clearly Chevy's the most one here. Well, you could show it obviously as a pie chart, right? And of course I go over this in the video, Chevy. Oops, except that it should be 115, darn near 50%, yes? Okay, why do we like pie charts? We like pie charts because it's all about the percentage, okay? It's always about the percentage. Most of the cars, or well, almost 50% of the cars I sell are Chevys. That's a big deal to me as a car buyer, as a car dealer. Let's say if I deal in used cars, all right. I sold a ton of Chevys last year, and I hardly sold any Dodges. What does that tell me? Don't buy a whole lot of Dodges because people aren't buying them for whatever reason. If I'm selling cars, you may have a weird, you may be one of those guys with a Mopar fetish. Good for you. That's Dodge things, right? Good for you. Good for you. But if they're not selling on your car lot, why are you going to stock a bunch of them? That's dumb. All right. If you are moving Chevys and that's the car that sells off of your lot the fastest, what does that tell you? Go buy a bunch more of those suckers to resell them. That's a big deal. Same with Toyota. Like, here's Toyota. It's great. Toyota's your second to most. Okay. And then, something like this. Whatever it happens to be. The idea is to quickly look at it and go, wow, Chevy is most of the population. Let's say this is 45% or whatever it is. Okay. Clearly it would be 115 divided by 240 percentage wise. I'll pop that up real quick. About 48%, my apologies, about 48%. Okay, and again, we go through the video. In the video, we go through and talk about how to do these graphs. I'm going to specifically talk today about why I chose this graph versus why I might choose this graph. Okay, I like this graph up here because it talks to me about the percentages. It screams percentages. Most of my cars that I'm selling are Chevys. That's a big deal, whatever it is. If it was your budget and like your housing budget was like this, dude, you should probably get a cheaper house. All right, this is house, and then like you got food, like bowling. I don't know, dude. Gas. I don't know, whatever. If that's your budget, you might have a problem here. You might have a problem here too. That's a lot of money to spend on bowling. But look at that and go, look, 80% of my housing, but 60% of my budget is housing. That's a lot. All right, maybe I need to do something different, get a cheaper house, whatever it happens to be. Because it's always about the percentages. Down here, this is just about the raw numbers. Okay, what do the raw numbers show me? Okay, well, it shows me that a lot of people are buying the Chevys. Okay, that's nice. And Toyotas, that's nice. I'm not sure that's helping me a lot, but this one's nice when you look at what's called a side-by-side bar chart, because it might be a situation where you want to look into, you might want to break it out, for instance, perhaps by male, female. And you want to compare them and see, Toyota, see if there's a difference for whatever reason. Okay, male, female. And you want to use this to compare and say, listen, for whatever reason, the women really like the Toyotas. I don't know why. Okay, and you can compare them in essence and see, okay, how do these different things slide out there? Okay, and take a look at them and then compare them and say, yeah, together those form 65 total vehicles. I think it was whatever I made up data, but maybe only 10 of them are males and 55 of them are females. And then take a look at that graph, which is the exact same graph as this, just broken out by a different particular variable. Okay. Now in the, I'm going to pause that real quick and go back to the other computer for a second. There's a lot more screwing around than you think there is teaching this class some days. On the PCC website, on your D2L there, you will see there's going to be a video that opens, not a video, there's going to be so the graphing assignment pops up. Where am I at? I'm on the wrong one, dummy. Here we go. There we are. Nice. So this is a practice one I made up, so I'm just going to use this in class for right now. This July 11th pivot table, just for your practice sake right now. Typically, I leave all these practice stuff up there because hopefully someday we might be able to get back into a class scenario. And what I like to have is data available for, okay, everyone play along with me and see what happens. Okay. So this is my all-time favorite thing to do in Excel, and I love Excel. Love it. Okay. If you don't, you're doing it wrong. Okay. Excel is fun. So there's 200 people here. So I highlight the whole thing. I go to insert pivot table and just hit OK. And you're like, oh, my data went away. No, it's still on sheet one. It's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at like brand of car. I'm going to put it on the rows so that it breaks it out by the kind of cars that are available. And then I'm also going to drag it down here to values as well. And as I said, there was 200 people here. 46 of them drive Beamers, 10 Chevys, and so on and so on and so on. And if you could see that this was way less than way more than 200, like 10,000 people, no one's going to go through their clipboard and go, there's another Chevy, there's another Chevy. No, that's what pivot tables are for. And so what I like to do is I like to just copy the data. And for your graphing assignment, this is what I would want to see you do. Just paste it over here. And then everything we're going to do is going to be insert and then under the graphs. So if you want a pie chart, just click here. I make a big deal about this in the video, but don't ever make a 3D pie chart. Notice how the purple one and the green one, because they're closer to you, they look bigger because you see the third dimension, okay? That is a optical illusion which you can really screw with people with, and it's not cool. It's another way to lie to people. This donut thing, it became kind of in vogue lately to do that. Like, oh, I'm so cool, I'm just gonna use the donut portion. You're weird, dude. This is the one you wanna use, okay? These two here are good if, for instance, if you were doing something like Africa, like, for instance, so I don't know, the GDPs or something of African countries. And so you'd have like, the big 4 or 5 ones in Africa that have like huge amounts of GDPs. And then the rest of them will be in this tiny little piece of other, all right? What this piece here does is it breaks out that tiny little piece of other and then breaks it out by, whatever countries those happen to be. Does that make sense? So like, it might be like Tanzania and this and this and this and these other ones. And they'll break them out in their own little separate pie chart off to the side, okay? This is the same thing, except it's basically a little brownie off to the side. It turns this slice of pie into a little brownie over here. It would be a better deal if there was like a bunch of cars, like I don't know, there was 1 Mercedes and then 2 Jeeps and so on and so on and so on. A bunch of these little farts that don't add up to much. You would see them in kind of like in this other category. And then when you hit this guy, it would break them out into their own, like the little kitty table, if you will, but you could see them individually. This is the one you should use. Again, in the videos, I make a big deal about this. Make sure you label it properly. Brand of car. If that's all I know, which in this case it is all I know, that's all I need to know. If it's brand of cars sold at Jay's Car Lot in February of 1997, then it should say that, all right? Be as specific as you can, because 2 things. First, if you show this to someone, they're like, oh my God, that's the ratio of car brands? Oh, it must be true forever. No. And then number 2, if it's me, I'm looking back at my old data and I see this pie chart, I'm like, geez, I was really, killing it with the BMWs, but, well, I must have been killing with the BMWs. Yeah, but this was 30 years ago, ding dong. It's not today, it's not current. So make sure you be as current as possible. Now, I will say this up here on the plus sign here, you can do this a couple of ways. You can click on the plus sign. Again, it's all in the video. If you go to data labels here, and then you click on this more button out here like this. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Data labels, there they are. Click on data labels, there you go. And now if you click on one of them and then right click on them, you can change those to percentages, which is what we want. We don't want the values, we want the percentages of them that are this and that. So whenever I see a pie chart, that's what I want to see from you. When I grade your pie charts, what I want to see is percentages, and I want to see, does this make sense? Brand of car, is this a good label for them? Okay. In Google Sheets, and I will do a Google Sheet example in a second too. But what the real point is this: is when you do these guys, and then when you turn this into me, this is how I want them turned in. You're going to create a Word document. I got like 87 Word documents open. No, this is I'm sorry, this is the other computer. I have 87 open on my other computer. There we go. New. There you go. Paste. Now, here's what I just did. I just did paste. As a general rule, I would argue that you shouldn't just paste. Some versions of Excel default to where the graph is linked to the data. When you change the data in the Excel, it'll also change it in the Word document. That's not as prevalent anymore, okay? Because now typically you have to tell it to be linked, okay? But it didn't always used to be that way, and you may have an older computer you're using and it will be linked automatically. So the one I always choose is this paste as a picture, this guy right here. So if you right click and this paste as picture, It's a picture now. It's just like any other picture. You stick it into a Word document, boom, there it is. Okay, it's not going to change. So when you do this graphing assignment, this is when I'm done. I want to paste it into a Word document just like this. Number one, da 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 da. Number two, da da da. Here it is, and so forth. And then when you're done, email me, or not email me, upload this Word document. That's how I want it turned in. Okay. A couple of things I'd like to just make a note of before I do that, though, is in Excel. And I sometimes I hesitate to show this because things will kind of go nuts. Up here, you'll see there are a variety of default graphs that you can choose from what they want to look like. Just as a word of caution, never use a black background if you're going to print this out on paper, ever. Do never. Because that much black, you almost always clog up the machine when it prints it. And it also just warps the paper funny on most printers. Not cool. Also, when you put that up on the board sometimes, the fancier the graph, the more people like me kind of get all, oh, pretty colors. Whoa, neato. What was the graph about? I don't know, but it sure was pretty, man. No, not the point. The point is just the facts, man. Just the facts. So although I like this one, I'm in my mind, I'm kind of lost because it's like those pastel colors are so pretty and so forth. So be careful with doing this, okay? But you're welcome to knock yourself out here in some of these designs and change it up. Just kind of cool. It is what it is. Now, also, let's say this 5% one was something I wanted to highlight. You see this piece of pie right here? If I click on the pie, it highlights the entire pie. See all those little dots? If I click on this little pie, this 5 slice again, only the 5 one is highlighted. And now if I click on it, I can drag it out. And so I can make a big deal about this, like, did you know only 5% of the cars we sell are Chevys? Oh no, or whatever it happens to be, okay? And this is how, once in a while, if I'm doing a PowerPoint, which I haven't done one for a while, like where I had to like present to people, but if there's something I want to point out, oftentimes I'll have this on the first slide, and then I'll bring this guy out just a skosh to highlight, hey, this is a problem, in case you were too dumb to see that that tiny little slice should be bigger or whatever. I will pull that out for you to make a big deal about it, okay? Because I don't want you to lose it. That's a big deal, all right? So I want to pull it out to make sure that we all see it, okay? Again, the reason we do these different graphs is to prove or to show different things. We want to illustrate different things, okay? For instance, suppose you wanted to do eye color. Jay, I think people buy cars based on their eye colors. I think different people with different eye colors buy different kinds of cars, okay? So what you can do is you can actually drag this into columns. And what I've actually done is I've broken out by what color eyeballs you have, what kind of cars you drive. And you're like, I don't think that makes a difference. You're probably right. And we're going to talk about that in probability when we get there later on. We're going to talk about how you're right, that isn't going to be a big deal. And we call those independent events, actually. And I screwed up. Let me go fix that real quick. I forgot. You want to make sure when you're doing this, you want to bring your labels for your eye colors with you. Sorry about that. Try that again. There we go. Much better. And then you can go to insert. Now, if you click on this drop down bar right here, it gives you a whole bunch of possibilities right off the bat. Stay away from the 3D. Stay away from any of the 3D graphs. Just 2D. That's all we want, man. The default right here is what's called a side-by-side graph. Okay, so it's car brands broken out by eye color. That's what this graph is telling me. Again, not sure why I care. Car brands by eye color. Okay, and that's great, cool, whatever. And so clearly, for whatever reason, a lot of brown-eyed people are buying Kias for whatever reason. I don't know why, and I don't know why the Hazel people are buying the BMWs. Like, man, I don't know. It's weird. But there it is. Okay, now, so we'll talk about these graphs a little bit more again when we get to probability class and see if there's a relationship there. And again, this relationship wouldn't make any difference at all. Oh, I'm sorry. What color eyes yet? No. But later on, things will happen to where, geez, you mean different people buy different things based on who they are as people? That's right. Yeah. So you mean that if you went to Grangeville, Idaho, small town up in the middle of the prairie somewhere, you're going to see a lot more SUVs and trucks sold than, say, like BMW stuff. Why? Because it snows up there. It's backwoods country people. They don't really drive fancy sports cars or, you know, luxury cars. You mean if I sold them in Portland, I'd sell a lot more of those? Yeah, exactly. Well, who saw that? Everybody. So that idea that the demographics, that's the whole point of demographics. And then, you know, what can we do about that? As an aside, if it bothers you that this red bar is red, what you can do is you can actually change it. If you're like me and it bothers you to see, I can't see brown. Brown, sure, brown, good enough. Okay, better. If it bothers you, for instance, when you saw those Victoria's Secrets shorts that said pink, but it was written in green or something, it just freaks with your brain, you can change that. That's one of the few things that I will actually change colors on because it annoys me to look at the wrong color written in it doesn't make sense to me. I can't handle that. Okay. But side by side bar chart, and you're like, Jay, I didn't really want it broken out by car brands. I wanted it by eye color instead. Cool. Excel can fix that too. Right under chart tools up here, you can click switch rows and columns, and you'll notice now here are all the blue-eyed people, okay, and here's the cars that they bought based on what BMW, Chevys, and so forth. Okay, now this would be, I guess, eye colors broken out by car brands, but you know, whatever. Eye color, and again, this is goofy data, so don't freak out about why we'd ever do that. I wouldn't. By car brand. But there will be times when I might want to do that, especially in a kind of a demographic situation, or it could be a situation of, you know, how did the kids fare in, you know, based on what math class they were in last year, right? So, you know, you pass or fail, let's say, based on whether you're in a geometry class or algebra 2 class or pre-calculus class, when you take the math test, okay, for the state. Again, be careful. Less is more on a graph. Less is always more, okay? I like it like this because it's all nice and separated and I can see what's going on better. Some of these you'll notice that gets too busy. Okay, it's a little too much. I look at it and I'm kind of like, oh, something's weird there. It's just, I don't know, I can't deal with it. Again, it's kind of pretty, but you know, whatever. It's not bad. It's a little busy. Some of these, like this one here, they're just all jammed together. It's really kind of hard to tell what's going on. Just be careful of that as you're doing these guys. Same with this one here. Everything's just too jam-packed together, plus the black background. My OCD is kind of kicking in on me there, okay? I'll go ahead and copy it this way just for fun, but in general, I would not do that, okay? And then again, down here, if you click on the corner of it, and then just right-click, paste special, paste as a picture, okay? Boom. All right, enough said about that. So we're gonna do those. One more I want to just show you real quick. If you come up here, you can actually go back to, okay, I'm just gonna delete this one, start over. Highlight this graph again, the same principle though. You just go to insert, and then click on this guy here. You can actually click on this, what are called stacked charts. And so the idea here is this is BMWs, and then it's broken. In essence, it's a pie chart in an elongated form, basically a brownie chart, I guess, if you want to think of it that way, right? So it's, and you can look at it. The nice thing about a stacked chart is because of the BMWs, this is its own, if you will, pie chart. And you'll notice that the amount of green percentage-wise from this bar chart compared to this one, 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 are different. Same with the red percentage-wise. There's a lot of red here. There's hardly any red here, and so on and so on. That's the nice thing about a stacked bar chart because it gives you the idea of multiple pie charts in essence. Okay, and that's why we like them. And again, if you didn't want it by, if you wanted it by eye color instead, you can flip the rows and columns around. But again, it's the exact same thing when you look at it here. Like there are no Chevy drivers in the Hazels for whatever reason. Okay, which yes, it says it over here. I can't look at this data and make heads or tails of it necessarily. When I see like this, I'm like, oh, well, there you go. Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's obviously some sort of relationship there. I'm going to copy this data real quick. Again, just quickly, when you go into your Google Sheets, and again, there is videos for these, so I do not intend to do them all right here in class today. But just be aware that everything is, in essence, the same. It is, I don't know, for this particular example, it's Ford Chevy-like in terms of, you know, they still have keys, you know, well, okay, back a few years ago, every car had a key, right? And it was all pretty much in the same spot, and it was all kind of the same thing. Now they all have a push button, and it's all in the same spot, but you get the idea. So what you're gonna do is, if you go here to go to data, here's your pivot table right there. And just hit OK or create or whatever. Yep, there you go. And then now it looks like this. It's similar but different, as I say. So if you click here, brand of car, and if you go to values, it's also just click on brand of car. There you go, piece of cake. Okay. And so again, if it's me, I highlight this data and go ahead and copy it to another tab or sheet. Okay. And then if you go to insert chart, here's where your chart comes in. Come on, Betsy, give me the chart. There it is. Nice. And this is the default, and it's just been recently where they've defaulted to putting the percentages on here. Okay. It's unfortunate, and I don't like it, but life goes on this way. No one asked me. They didn't ask me how I wanted things done in terms of this. I would have told them to put percentages on here before. But you can change a few things like this in here. You can do some different things. Here's where the axis and chart titles are. So make sure you turn the chart title on. Chart title right here. You just go brand of car. Okay, there it is. You can't. I don't think you can center it. It's weak. I mean, it does what it does, but it's a little weak. You know, and be aware of that. Don't be upset about it. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is exactly the same thing on Excel. If you click off of that pivot table, which I did, all that stuff that was over here went away. It's still there. Just click back on this, and it comes back. There you go. You can also add a column. So I think we did eye color on the column. Exact same thing happens here, and off we go. Okay. Oops. Be careful. Just highlight just that, dummy. There you go, right there. Insert chart. And it assumes it knows what you want, but if that's not what you want, you can also select down in here some other sorts of charts, like for instance, this stacked bar chart. Boom, done. I would say this, be careful. There's this stacked bar chart down here that is different looking. This is because this does them as each as if they're percentages. That's a true pie chart in essence. You with me? That's all, but it looks like we sold the same number of cars. I don't like that one because it looks to me like we sell the exact same number of Fords, Hyundais, and everything. I prefer this one, which gives me the best. Oh, where'd you go? Sorry about that. I prefer this guy because it gives me the best of both worlds. I clearly didn't sell many Chevys, but here's the percentages of them that I did sell. Okay, so just be aware of that. We will, in the videos, I talk about area charts, like stacked area charts. To be mentioned that in the video. They're in essence the same thing, but you just basically just connect the dots from the top of each graph. That's basically it. Sometimes they're better. I don't normally think they're better. The only time I think they're better is if on the x-axis you have dates. So if you had like 2000 and 2010, 2020, and so forth, so on, and you had a certain amount of things, Beamers sold or whatever, and then it was based on eye colors or whatever, you could track that over time. So in 1990 it was this, in 2000 it was this, and so on and so on. Okay, that's the only time I like that stacked chart for that purpose. And again, that's mentioned in the video. One more thing I wanted to say about this. Again, if I click off of this, that piece over here, that pie chart bit goes away. If you click back on it, it's back. If you want to delete these, you simply click on them and hit delete, and then they go away. You can also undrag them if that makes you happy. Okay. So we're looking at a lot of graphs this week in that regard. Let me think what I want to say about that. There's another chart that I wanted to show you that I'm not going to ask that you do. There's actually two kinds of charts that I just want you to see them. Speedometer graph. Okay. Some people do these and it just makes me so angry. All right. I had a boss a few years ago who every time he had to present, he would go up and he would put one of these dumb speedometers up there. And all it was showing you was like, check it out. We are at 95% attendance rate. You had to give me a graph to show me that, because I'm pretty down with what 95% looks like, pal. And there's nothing confusing about saying that we have 95% attendance rate. Okay, nothing confusing about that at all. Okay, what is confusing is why you wasted your time making a graph of that. Okay, so that's one that kind of annoys me. And then speaking of that, by the way, that same guy, when he's no longer with us here, but he used to annoy me that because every time he would do a presentation, I would ask him for his PowerPoint, and he goes, "Oh yeah, you like that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's in my statistics curriculum today." So I go in and play it for the kids, and they'd be like, and I would never tell them where I got it from, but they're like, "Oh, that graph's terrible. Oh, what do you think's wrong with this? Oh, that graph's terrible. Oh yeah." And it was fascinating because like you were just a little bit of common sense and a little bit of training, people can pick out what he's trying. Like mostly him, he wasn't trying to like pull the wool over your eyes. He just didn't know what he was doing. He's just making up random things. One that used to make me so mad was he would make a bar chart for every offense that had been committed. And so there'd be like 30 referrals for defiance or cussing or, like defiance or whatever in class. Okay, great. That's like obviously the most. And then skipping. Okay, great. And then the next ones are like, there's one kid got caught smoking weed. All right, whatever. And one kid got caught doing this. And one kid got, and the thing was 80 miles long. And there was like 1 million bars and you couldn't read it. And like, it looked like scribbles across the bottom of the page. Well, if you like focused in, it was like written like this: smoking in the boys' room. It was this. It was this. It was this. And I'm like, why are you telling us all those things? Those aren't problems. Why do like you should just like look at the top 4 or 5 behaviors and say, if you guys would really pay attention to this and help us, maybe we can then get a handle on some of these behaviors. So the next week he came in, or the next month, and he goes, "Hey, I changed my thing." So what he did was he took all those other like one-offs, shoved them into a column and called it other. And so now you had, okay, like 10 of these and 20 of these, 10 of these and 14 of those. And then this column was like 95 feet high of others. I'm like, dude, now it looks like we have all these other horrible things. What could be in there? I mean, it could be a gun violation, it could be all these other things. You're freaking everybody out saying other. I said, just get rid of that. I said, we have 4 or 5 major problems. And if like, for instance, if there was like gun violence, obviously that would be like a whole nother discussion. It was the typical garden variety kid things that go on at the high school. Like 4 or 5 things. Let's try to work on those. And then these other things are one-offs. They're not problems. They just happened. And so, it's not an epidemic that a kid gets caught smoking weed in the boys' room. That's a one-off this whole year, maybe. And so why are you talking about it? Just punish the kid, move on. Life goes on. And so, there's just some weird things like that. You look at them and like, that's not helping anything. You're not making it better for anybody showing us that graph. There's one more graph that I want to look at real quick, and it is one about skin cancer rates in U.S. graph. I think I can find the one quickly by just doing that. Maybe I can't. I may have to send it to you later this week if I can't find it quickly. Oh, it's not small enough. All right, there's one that's kind of like this, only it's broken out by like county. I think maybe by county. If I do by county. Oh, yeah, here it is. Yep. All right. Now, I like this graph, and it's not a bad graph. But a lot of times, graphs will tell you things, and you're like, wait, what are we saying here? What is going on? And actually, this isn't skin cancer, but this is similar to the skin cancer. I'll send the skin cancer one out later. But clearly, there is a problem in this neck of the woods, yes? And there's a problem in here, and there's some problems in here, and there's some problems up here. What is going on in Nome, for God's sakes, okay? And so, when you looked at that, the one I'm going to send out this week about skin cancer, you're like, oh my God, everyone's going to be like, down here, it's going to be just like all covered in skin cancer, the sun and everything. But there's like spots up in here, and you're like, what is going on? And like, why are the people dying of skin cancer or whatever in North Dakota, for God's sakes? And you're like, oh, well, it must be ice fishing. No, what it is it's percentage. So think about that always. When you look at these graphs, in this case, it's the amount of its deaths per 100,000 population. In this case, on this one I'm looking at right here. Well, if there's not 100,000 people, like probably in the whole county of North Dakota, you know, pretty much, you know, I mean, maybe it's 200,000 people in all of North Dakota. If you get a 3 or 4 more people die this year, all of a sudden it's no longer a tiny little percentage. It's all of a sudden now it's a bigger percentage because you can change by a great deal. Versus in Miami, you know, how many million people live in Miami down there? Then you get a couple more cases this year. It doesn't ratchet the percentage up very much at all. You know, right? Oh, it goes up a little bit, but not a great deal percentage wise. If there's only 100,000 people in there, and instead of having 5 people had it last year, say 10 people have it this year, like, well, it only went up 5. Yeah, but it doubled the rate. Okay. So be aware of what it is you're talking about. Are you talking about raw numbers, or are you talking about percentages? Okay. And percentages can change vastly and widely if you have very few people in the population. So if there's very few people that you know about or in the population right now, then clearly that tiny is going to be a tiny. Then you add a few more people to that that are positive, for instance, for melanoma or whatever. Then the percentage goes up wildly. All right. But if you have a giant population and you get a few more people, you can actually get like a lot more people raw numbers wise, but percentage wise, it barely changes at all. And I think that's something that you see frequently nowadays. You see it frequently. People don't grasp what they're looking at. They just see a picture, they look at it, and they freak out, or they get upset about it, or whatever it is. And you're like, we need to go a little deeper than that. Are we talking about raw numbers? Are we talking about percentages? Should we be talking about raw numbers, or should we be talking about percentages? Okay, because oftentimes, you know, it's not about the raw numbers. Like a lot of people die probably by trains in this country. Okay, I don't know, whatever. But well, okay, why are they dying by trains? Well, they're goofing around the railroad tracks. Well, that's a problem. Okay. So if you're not goofing around the railroad tracks, what's probably get hit by a train? Probably not very high. Okay. For instance, you know, there's always some knucklehead that's walking along the tracks with his headphones in and all this stuff, and you get run over by a train. Well, guess what? If you're not playing on the tracks, probably not a huge deal. Now, there's accidents obviously to happen, right? Car dies on the railroad tracks. That sucks. Obviously, there's other horrible things that can happen. But in terms of the people who are not playing around on the tracks, what's the chances of you dying? Well, like 35 people died, Jay. It was still horrible. Yeah, but percentage-wise, what chance is it? Oh, it's not very high. That's right. So in that case, it should be a percentage deal. It shouldn't be raw numbers. All right. Other times, it should be like you should be maybe looking at raw numbers. All right. And you know, what can we do? Obviously, that's why at railroad crossings, that's why they put up flashing lights. That's why they put up barricades. They try to take care of these things, right? Because they realize people were dying, you know, back in the old days, get hit by trains because, you know, if a train's speeding along and it's like a blind curve or something, or you can't see what's going on, obviously that was a problem. So they did something about it. Again, another place where statistics came into play. Now, you could argue that it only came into play because they got sued, maybe, but the idea was there's a lot of them there, and it was a raw number situation. And now we've got the raw numbers down to where, you know, as there's not that many raw numbers, and obviously there's still matter to whoever gets hit by them. But percentage wise, it's a very small chance that happening. It's not something I think about on a daily basis. I don't think I've ever thought about getting hit by a train, to be honest with you. It never crossed my mind. Similar, obviously, nowadays too, when we talk about the particular virus that's going around right now. You know, if you are in a certain age group, if you're like under 50 and you're in good health and everything, it's not really a concern to catch it. Probability wise, right? It's not, by the way. Probability, I'm going to say this about 1 million times before now and the end of the term. Probability and statistics, it's more than two sides of the same coin. We've always say things like that, they're connected. Yeah, it's more than that. They're better, they're even more than that. The idea that when you're going around in our daily life, when you drive up to an intersection and, you know, it's 8 in the morning and you look right and you look left and you decide to go left, you do that because you've done it enough times and you have statistics in the back of your head that realize that if it's this time of morning and I see this, I should go left. Why? Because it's faster than going right. That's how you base your whole life, unless you've never lived somewhere and it's the first day you've ever driven down this road. If you do the same thing day after day after day, ask yourself, why do you do it that way? It's because you've done it the other way enough times that you realize that you're going to base your decisions on past experiences. That's 100% the case. Okay. So statistics and probability always work out that way. If I ask you, why'd you go this way? Because it's probably going to be faster. There you go. Probably right there. Probability right there. Off the top of your head. It's the first thing you say. Think about this week. And next week, we're going to talk about this in class a little bit. I'll probably ask you, I'll probably call out on you and pull you out and whatever. Think about this week where you made a decision based on statistics, not statistics that you like physically collected on purpose, but statistics that you've collected over the years just by being around things. In the back of your head, there's this giant Excel sheet somewhere back there. And when something happens, you go, okay, this is true, this is true, this is happening. Okay, this is what I should do. And you base your decision based on that, okay? Sometimes we get on autopilot, but you got on autopilot because of what happened in the past. Sometimes you never like update your data. You kind of stick with what has worked for a long time, and that's okay, but just be aware of that. One more thing and then we'll get off. I had a boss some years ago. Every conversation I ever had with her went bad after about the first year maybe she was here. It was always bad. She was always upset at me about something, right? And it was just awful. So this one time I had to go talk to her because I was in charge of the seniors that weren't going to graduate. And in her infinite wisdom, she put that class first period, but it was up against a bunch of stuff the senior kids had to take. And it was the first week of school and there was nobody in the class. I'm like, oh man, she's going to make me teach pre-algebra or something awful. So I'm like, I'm going to go out there ready to go. So I said, listen, I think we should, there's no one scheduled for this class. I'll work with them during my prep period, my other prep period, and whatever, but why don't you let me teach algebra 2 or something? And she goes, and then she just stopped and she goes, Jay, I haven't spoken yet. And I went, I know. And then she's like, we're just gonna leave it the way it is, and then walked away. And it freaked me out. It was like the most pleasant conversation I've ever had with her, and I was just floored. I nearly passed out. And I said something to the vice principal who's standing there, and I go, what just happened? He goes, oh, I told her to leave you alone this year. And I'm like, dude, give a brother a heads up in that case. That's not cool. I about freaked out because based on all the statistics, all the data that I had from her, all right, I knew it was going to end badly, and it didn't, and it freaked me out. Okay, and so just kind of keep that in your mind as you go along. Statistics plays a role in everything that we do, and I don't mean from the standpoint of like, oh, I was reading this latest statistic about this or that. I mean just the data that you personally collect every day. Okay, and then also think about that this week as you're doing things. How did I make that decision? Why did I do it? And what did I base it on? And like, see if you haven't subconsciously collected data, number one, because you have. And then number two, have you updated that data recently? Okay. And then number three, is that data in any way skewed or biased in your mind? Okay. Skewed or biased meaning, have you ever looked into it any deeper than a very cursory look? Okay. So we have ideas, things that we think about, things that we just kind of have in the back of our head. Why is it that way? All right. Did you look any further than that? Yes, maybe that's what it used to be. Have you looked any further than that? Sometimes in a fight with your significant other, someone will say something and you'll be like, yeah, that's how it used to be. That's not how it is now, right? And it's that idea that maybe they or you have not updated the information lately. And granted, there's a lot of other information you have to overcome because maybe they've been collecting data on your behavior for a long time. And so they have a right to kind of feel that way, but like, okay, things are kind of different now. And do we need to go back and edit some of that data? I know I sound kind of like a psychologist at this point, but that's how life goes. From a probability standpoint and a logical fallacies, it'll come up in that again as well too. When we get to logical fallacies, you'll think I'm talking about the same thing throughout because statistics and probability is all logic. That's all it is. It's all based on logic. Everything we do in a straight decision should be based on logic. Now you're like, well, sometimes I'm emotional, brother. I'm right there with you. Okay. So there will be times when emotion obviously plays into it. But when it comes down to, should we teach this math curriculum or this math curriculum? Should I go this way or should I go this way? All else being equal, you should base it based on logic. Where does that logic come from? It comes from data. So that data says that this and this should probably be the best answer to do it the most efficiently, the fastest, the cheapest, the whatever it is that you're trying to maximize or optimize. Okay. And again, if all you're doing is brewing kombucha, and selling it at the Saturday market or something like that, and calling it artisanal, that's fine. Don't worry about doing statistics on it. But if you're going to brew that stuff and sell it like for a wide audience, you want them, when they grab Jay's kombucha off the shelf, you want to taste like Jay's kombucha every single time. You don't want any slop in it. You don't want them to be like, oh, this tasted good last week, but it tastes terrible now. You can get by with that at Saturday market because people are like, oh, Saturday market, it's cool, it's whatever. But when you go to buy something off the shelf, like you buy a Ritz cracker, when a Ritz cracker tastes like a Ritz cracker, tastes like a Ritz cracker, tastes like a Ritz cracker. It tasted that way in 1972. It'll taste that way 50 years from now. It'll taste that way whether they were made in Portland or whether they were made in Miami. It doesn't make any difference because a Ritz cracker is a Ritz cracker. And that's the idea that, when you do these things, just be aware of that. That's what you need to have happen. So again, all across our board, that's where statistics is going to play into it. This week can be a lot of graphing. The graphing assignment pops up this week. It should be live right now, I think. Yeah, no, it was live last week, I guess. It's still up right now. And then this week, we're going to move in. So coming into this next week, we're going to be talking about percentiles and standard deviation and things like that. So going forward from that. Anyway, I guess I'm done talking. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir, Paul. I can't hear you though, bud. Unmute. Hang on, Paul, you're muted.
There we go.
All right. Hit me.
Okay. So on the gee whiz graph this week, the discussion, you want us to just respond to all these threads that are on here?
No, just respond to your own, or you just respond to the thread, copy 2 graphs on there for yourself, and I'll respond to yours. You don't have to respond to everybody else's. If you want to, you're welcome to.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm not seeing where they're coming through. So we do 2 of these, any 2 of these, the gee whiz graph or the line with statistics, or?
No, you're gonna read the gee whiz graph. You're gonna read it, and then you're gonna go online and you're gonna find 2 examples of bad graphs.
Okay.
And then you're gonna post those into the discussion and say why they're bad graphs.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Bad or misleading.
Oh yeah, can I get my homework checked? That's due next week, right?
Correct.
All the homework's due next week. We just turn in the answers to you next week then, right? Correct. All right. And is there some way I can get it checked? Is there like student service or something I can go through to?
I'll try this week to get some answers up for you so you can kind of look them over yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not a real good way to do that.
No, I just want to make sure I'm doing them right. So, all right. And then are we reviewing for the midterm next week, or is that next week, or how do we do this?
So yeah, let me check here real quick. I think the midterm's the week after next, and the review, is next week, I think. Let me double check here. And when I say review, there will be a review. There's a review for it that's online there. Let me see here, July.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, so next week, the midterm review pops up along with an answer key, so you can review it and check yourself.
Perfect. And then we come in there to take the midterm. We come to class. It's in class, or how does that work?
It'll be a Zoom class. It won't be a Zoom class. It'll just be, you go on to the D2L, you'll open it up. The midterm will be live then. You'll have 3 hours to get it done, and then another half an hour to upload it.
I need time, man. I got the principles, man. It just takes me a long time to go back and forth and figure stuff out. So that's good. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anybody else?
And you're 1.5 out of 10.
No, I got that.
No other questions? All righty. Well, have a good week then. See you next week. Email me if you got any questions.